Hi boys and girls. When you see this video, it's going to be Thursday math time. But right now I'm still in part of my Wacky Wednesday outfit, so don't judge. So today you're going to be responsible for completing your blue iReady for lesson 18. Okay, and before you do that, I just want you to watch this video so that you can review some of the most important things that we learned during this unit, okay? So just remember that in lesson 18, our target or our goal for what we're trying to learn is to be able to compare fractions, okay? And to show how we compare fractions, we're using symbols like less than, greater than, and equal to, okay? And when you compare fractions, boys and girls, there's a lot of different strategies you can use. And sometimes you might pick a strategy that is your favorite, and sometimes you should make sure you pick a strategy that's like the most appropriate or the easiest one for that sort of problem. So I'm just going to review that, and these are going to be pretty similar to what you see on your blue iReady, okay? So be paying close attention. If you want to, you can be taking notes. That could be helpful during this review so that you can look at them during your blue iReady. Otherwise, you can just be listening very closely, but don't be tuning me out because otherwise you might have some questions, okay? So we're going to go over the different strategies. So one strategy is to make a common denominator. So first of all, I remember the denominator is the bottom part of the fraction, right? And common means the same. So that means to make the same denominator. So let's review that. I put an example here. I have 2/3. How does it compare to 4/6? Now, finding a common denominator for this comparing fractions is going to be probably a pretty effective strategy because I know that it's going to be pretty easy to figure out what number both denominators go into. So my denominators are 3 and 6. So I need to know what do both 3 and 6 go into. So if I wasn't sure, I could go down the 3 and the 6 on my multiplication chart, but I'm pretty sure about this because I know that 3 can go into 6, right? And clearly 6 goes into 6. So my common denominator, which I like to write on the side so I don't forget, is definitely 6, okay? So 4/6 already has the common denominator, so I don't have to change that. That's why this is a good strategy for this type of problem, because I only have to change one. So I need to change this one. I'm going to rewrite it underneath. 2/3 times what is going to give me an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 6. Okay, so now I set up my puzzle. I have a missing piece of the puzzle here that will be easy to solve because I know these two pieces. So 3 times what equals 6? 3 times 2 equals 6. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. 2 times 2 is 4. I gave away the answer. 4. Okay, so I know that 2/3 is equivalent or the same as 4/6. Okay? These are the same. So now I'm working with some common denominators here, right? I know this is the same as this, and it has the common denominator of 6, and so does the other fraction I'm comparing. So I can really be comparing 4/6. How does it compare to 4/6? Oh, so I know those are the same. Those are equal to. So that means that 2/3 is equal to 4/6. Okay? Another example. Sometimes the common denominator strategy always works. So sometimes when you see a comparing fraction problem that you're just really not sure about, you can always go to common denominator. So 2/5 and 1/3. Miss Chase is like a little stumped on this one. So I'm going to be finding a common denominator. I need to think about what number do both 5 and 3 go into evenly. I could go down my multiplication chart to check. So if I'm going down to 5, I'm looking at some of these numbers, okay. Go down to 3. Oh, I noticed there's a 15 in the 3 and there's a 15 in the 5. So that means that both 3 and 5 go into 15 evenly. So that can be my common denominator. All right, 15. Always write it down so you don't forget it. Now, I do need to change both of these fractions because they both don't have 15 as the denominator. So first I'm going to do 2/5 times what gives me a fraction with a common denominator of 15. Okay, I'm making an equivalent fraction here. 5 times what equals 15? 5 times 3 equals 15. I just saw that on my multiplication chart. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. Now I multiply the top. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so that means that 2/5 is equivalent to 6/15. Not done yet. I got to do my 1/3. So I'm rewriting it. 1/3 times what is going to give me an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 15. So 3 times what equals 15? Well, if I know that 5 times 3 equals 15, I know that 3 times 5 equals 15. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. 1 times 5 is 5. All right, so now I found my equivalent fractions with my common denominator. I know 2/5 is the same as 6/15. I know 1/3 is the same as 5/15. Now I can compare, boys and girls, because my equal parts or my denominator are the same. So I can be looking at my numerator. 6 is what to 5? Well, 6 is clearly greater than 5, right? So that means that 2/5 is greater than 1/3. Okay? That's common denominator strategy. Let's move on to comparing a common numerator. So this is when your fraction has the same numerator or top. Let's look at this example. If I have 2/5 and I have 2/12, how can I compare that? So I know these are my equal parts, and this is how many I have of each. So I'm thinking about, like, it's my birthday, and my cake is cut into 5 pieces, and my mom says that I can eat 2. I feel like that's kind of a lot of cake. What if it's my birthday and my cake is cut into 12 pieces, and my mom says I could eat 2? Well, I know 2 out of 5 is definitely greater than 2 out of 12, okay? 2/12 would be like small slivers. 2/5, we're thinking a cake that's like about this, okay? So those are kind of some big chunks. The 12th is going to be small. Pretty similar to this sort of problem. What if I have 4 out of 80? Remember, this fraction bar, you can use a few different terms for it, and you can say out of. So 4 out of 80 or 4 out of 6. Okay, so if I have something that's cut into 80 pieces, 80 equal parts, and I get 4 of them, or if I have something that's cut into 6 equal parts and I get 4 of them, well, I know these would be a lot smaller, right? So that means that 4/80 is less than 4/6. Remember, when you're using these signs, they're always eating the bigger number. So that's why he's coming after the 4/6, because that one's bigger, okay? All right, another thing to do is to compare using benchmark fractions. So we talked about how benchmark fractions are popular fractions that are going to be easy to compare to. So some of those are going to be like 1/2, right? We can pretty easily compare to 1/2. And the other one can be fourths. We can pretty easily compare to 1/4 or 3/4, okay? So, and also, we're thinking about comparing to 0 or comparing to 1, right? 1 is 1 whole, okay? So let's look at these examples. If I have 7/6 compared to 4/5, if I want to compare to benchmark fractions, what I'm going to do is decide what these ones are probably closest to? Well, I know these are pretty close to 1 whole, boys and girls. And I know that because if I have 4 out of 5, I almost have 1 whole. Because if that was 1 whole, it would be 5 out of 5. And this one is 7 out of 6. So that tells me that this fraction is greater than 1 because the numerator is greater than the denominator, okay? So whenever you have a fraction, when the numerator, or the top, is bigger than the denominator, that means your fraction is greater than 1, okay? So I really want you to know that. So just for more examples, if you look over here really quick. Whoa, just dropped my laptop. And we say, like, if we have 7 over 2, the numerator is bigger than the denominator. That means this number is greater than 1. If I have 12 over 4, this numerator is greater than the denominator, so that means that this fraction is greater than 1. Okay? So just know that for your blue eye writing. So let's look at these again. So now that we know that 7 over 6 is greater than 1, and we just talked about how 4/5 is almost 1, right? So when we compare this to our benchmark fraction 1, we have figured out that 7/6 is greater than 4/5, okay? Let's look here. I have 1/6 is compared to 2/4. So I'm thinking, what fraction, what benchmark fraction are these very close to? I know, boys and girls, that 2 is half of 4. So 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. Like if you look here, here is the half, and here are the fourths. See how where the line goes down in the half, it's the same thing as 2/4, right? 1/2 is equal to 2/4. So that means this is a half. So my benchmark fraction that I'm going to compare to is 1/2. I know this one is the same thing as a half. How about 1/6? Well, if I was looking for a fraction equivalent to 1/2 with 6 as the denominator, it would be 3/6 because 3 is half of 6. So since this is less than 3/6, I know that this is going to be less than 2/4. Okay? And the last way I want to discuss is using visual models or math reasoning. So some might say, like, this is kind of common sense, okay? So if I'm comparing 1/4 and 7/8, I could think about this picture in my head. If I have 1/4 of something compared to 7/8 of something, clearly this one is more, right? 7/8 is almost 8/8, which would be 1 whole. So I definitely know that 1/4 is going to be less than 7/8, okay? How about this one? I made a visual model here for 3/6, I drew it out, and 4/8, I drew that out. Remember, when you're drawing fractions, the denominator is the number of equal parts you have. So Miss Chase drew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts, and I shaded in 3, right? When I look at these models, I hope all you guys at home are saying, those are the same, Miss Chase. They both show 1/2, right? So since 3 is half of 6, this is 1/2. Since 4 is half of 8, this is 1/2. So because of those things that I know, 3/6 and 4/8 are equal to each other, okay? All right, so that's your review. If you're getting a little confused during the blue eye ready, you could always decide to come back into this video and review a few more things, okay? But you guys have spent a lot of time on this week, so I think you're ready. Good luck.